feeling sad and lonely, an old man off the street started talking to an old drunk who was barely on his feet. The sadness in the old drunk's eyes.
Hello, this is Alicia. Today I have with me on the phone Mr. Jerry Collins, who lives in the Nashville, Tennessee area. How you doing, Jerry?
I'm doing fine, lady. How are you doing?
I'm doing really great. We tried this a little while ago and it didn't work, so we're going to try it one more time.
Well, persistence always pays off.
I know what you mean. You know, we were discussing earlier, you've done a lot of things recently, and we're going to save that to last, but you got started in the music business at a very early age. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I was growing up, we didn't have the TVs and all the stuff you have nowadays, so a home entertainment system was the people in the family had to entertain themselves, and my parents both played music, and so they bought us guitars and mandolins and violins, and at 5 years old I could reach around a mandolin neck, so I started playing a mandolin. My brother was 8 at the time, so he started playing fiddle, and a year later we was doing shows with country music stars off of KLCN, Blytheville, Arkansas, when they'd come up to Missouri. So I guess our first appearance started at a fairly early age.
Where did you live then?
We was in southeast Missouri. We lived in a town called Sykeston. In fact, a lot of people came from Sykeston. Oni Wheeler and a bunch of people came out of Sykeston. Karen Wheeler. A lot of people in Nashville here originated out of Sykeston, Missouri.
So you said your mother and dad didn't actually play, well, they weren't in the recording industry, but they were playing for people to listen, and you went on the road with them, or what?
No, they were never on the road, but they grew up in a time period when everybody in a family just about played music. My grandfather played piano, my mother's father and my dad's father played the 5-string banjo, and my dad played fiddle. And well, you know, they didn't do it professionally, but they just did it for their own selves. In fact, I've got an old postcard, a picture of the Wilburn family back before Teddy and Doyle was even ever known as the Wilburn brothers. Their family was a musical family just kind of like mine, except they had a larger family. But that's what we did back in those days. The families all played music.
All right. So when did you actually start playing professionally or semi-professionally on the road in other towns and that sort of thing?
Well, I started playing dances in Miami, Florida when I was 12 years old. And after that, later on, was working the nightclubs in Miami. In fact, my parents signed for me to work in nightclubs when I was 16 years old because I was underage. And then by the time I was 17, my mother and I and the band we had then, we were playing theaters and drive-in theaters, and the old stories about playing on the rooftops of the concession stand, that's what we did in those days.
Oh, and my goodness.
People sit in the car and honk the horns if they liked you.
So that's how you progressed in the business, and your instrument was guitar at that time?
Yeah, I was playing guitar then, but by then I had been doing it so many years that I decided to get a real job and started building houses when I was 19 years old. But that just that didn't quite scratch the itch. And I guess once you get infected by music, it's something that stays with you the rest of your life.
And you know it is, whether you're professional, semi-pro, or just enjoy it.
Exactly. It does not go away.
No, it doesn't. Who were your early influences as far as styles of music was concerned?
Well, my brother was the greatest musician in the family. He sucked all the talent out of our family. He played everything with a string on it, plus he could play a handsaw and get just as pretty music out of a handsaw as he could a violin.
Oh, wow. That's a lost art, isn't it?
But in those days, he would sing all the Mac Wiseman songs. An old song called "It's Sweet to Be Remembered." My brother sang it all the time. And then I used to go to the shows when I was a teenager, and I would not miss a Furlong Husky show because he was the greatest entertainer I've ever met. And 10 years later, I was standing on the stage working with Furlong and had been being booked by Mac Wiseman. So both of these people that I grew up watching and listening to their music became part of my life 10 years later here in Nashville.
Oh, that must have been a dream come true.
It was. I mean, you couldn't write a story that worked out any better than that. That was the icing on the cake there.
That's amazing. And I know that you were on the road with the Furlan Husky show for a long time, but what other people have you worked with?
Oh, I started out with Wilma Lee and Stoney Cooper at one of the Grand Ole Opry acts here. And I was with them in the early 60s. And we were on the road the week that President Kennedy was killed. And our next show date that week was Boston, Massachusetts, his hometown.
Oh, wow.
Which was an odd situation, because we tried to cancel the show, but they said, no, come on and do the show, so we did. And it was a rather emotional evening there. And then our next date was the next afternoon in New York City, and that was the roadshow version of a movie they had just previously made called Country Music on Broadway.
I remember that.
And so this is when country music hit Broadway. It was Wilma Lee and Stoney and myself, Hank Williams Jr., Ernest Tubbs, Lefty Frizzell, all of the original Troubadour band when he had Cal Smith fronting the show and Jack Green was still playing drums. Just a great bunch of musicians, and that was really a highlight show right there. In fact, I found pictures of this show in my mother's footlocker in a 1964 edition of Country Song Roundup.
Oh, what a treasure.
Because the pictures were made in November of '63, but they came out in the spring edition of the Country Song Roundup, and my mother found it and saved it. And I've got one of them old faded pictures on the wall here at the house right now.
I think I've seen that one. That is amazing. You know, I'm sure it was easier then than it is now, by far, to get into the music business, but it still had to be quite an accomplishment to have gone from admiring someone from afar, so to speak, to being on the stage with them. How did you manage to do that? I mean, I know you're good, but at that age, how did you do that?
That's a funny story. Jimmy Capps, a great guitar player here in town that played on our first records, was working with Furlan, and Furlan had a truck and a camper he wanted to sell. Mm-hmm. And in those days, we'd been traveling in limousines, towing trailers.
Oh, wow.
And which was okay, but you still couldn't cook a meal or lay down and go to sleep hardly in a car.
Right.
And so Furlan wanted to sell this truck and camper, and I went and bought it and got acquainted with him. And he realized that we were all on the same label and doing the same thing. And he asked me if I would like to join up with his show, and so we worked out a deal to where we could do his shows and our shows. And in fact, his son Danny Husky became our drummer in our band. Our band was a second generation band at the time. And then when they did his shows, they became the Hush Puppies. So it was a real convertible band, but they were very good musicians, all young people. And and they were second generations of other musicians, and so
that probably helped. Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, they all grew up in the music industry, and so it was kind of a no-brainer that they go on the road. And in fact, one of my wife's cousins was only 15 years old when I got him in the union here, and he still comes over and plays here in Nashville, and he makes all of our Christmas shows and everything with us. So he's still very active in the business.
Now, at that point in time, you were married to Gwen, and
That's
you and
right.
she did a lot of music together, and it was really surprising to me to find out that one of the songs that was popular on the Young Folks chart back in the 60s, 70s was a song by the Youngbloods called Let's Get Together, but I found out later that you and Gwen had recorded that also. I had no idea that it had ever been on the country charts.
Yeah, we were the first country act to do that song. She discovered the song, and she said, here's a song I'd like to do, so we went in and produced it, and Capitol Records heard it, and they bought our contract and put us on Capitol Records. In fact, that was the song that put us on that label.
You know, it's amazing to me when I think of classic country music, of course, being from Alabama rather than Nashville, I would think of names like Merle Haggard and George Jones and the big boys, Furlan Husky, Ray Price. But it's just, people don't generally know of all the other real stars who played over the years throughout the country and made country music great. They're not the names that seem to be every day, but people like you and Kevin Dobson and others, you've absolutely, without a doubt, made your mark in the industry. And there are so many, and it's amazing to me to sit around and hear the stories that they tell, which brings to mind a question I had for you. I know that you've got a couple of stories. One of them particularly was funny, and there were some very, very serious stories that are memorable to you. Tell us about those.
Well, one of the funny stories was one night in Arkansas. We was going to, going to Enid, Oklahoma, and we left Fort Smith, Arkansas, and we was running late, and we were traveling in a truck with a big cab-over camper, and it was Ferlin and Gwen and myself. And we decided that it was going to take her longer to get dressed than us, so she got in the back of the camper and she's putting her makeup on, getting everything ready, and getting, in fact, even tuning the guitars and everything. And so the minute we get to the auditorium, she was going to take the stuff in while Ferlin and I got dressed, and we just barely going to make it. So we had to stop on the side of the road and check a tire. And when we did, she jumped out of the back of the camper with two guitars in her hand, wearing a white mini dress and silver boots. And the truck drivers thought they had saw a mirage or something, and they were slamming on brakes trying to stop and pick her up. And then we got her back in the truck and took off, and we made it onto Enid, Oklahoma.
Don't you wish you'd had a video of that?
Oh, that would have been funny. If we had time, we'd have probably done more. But Ferlin said, wouldn't it have been funny if we just let her stand on the side of the road and us pull off down on the side road where they couldn't see the truck, you know? and then when the truck would get stopped, we'd run out there and pick her up and speed away.
That is hilarious.
But we didn't have time to do all that, but that was a funny sight.
You told me something earlier about a performance that you did in a rather large venue that was just really a memory, and another one you did in an open air, I think. But tell us about those, because that was just fantastic to hear.
Well, in a closed venue up in Rochester, New York, the Eastman Kodak Company, which made all the cameras we had for years, they had a big opera house they'd built, and the acoustics was so great that you could hear every voice off of the stage without a sound system. Mm-hmm. But then they put a sound system in that was just state-of-the-art system. And one night, Ferlin Husky was doing Just a Closer Walk with Thee, and the lights were turned down dim, and it was a blue spot, and when you could hear everyone breathe in the whole place. And when that song was over, everybody came out of their seats, and it was one of the biggest standing ovations I'd ever seen.
Wow.
And that was a thrill to be part of that, because the sound was so good it gave you goose pimples.
Wow. What was the one about the sunset? The story about the sunset?
Well, now that's a Ray Price story. We had worked in Springfield, Colorado one night, us and Ferlin, at a rodeo down there, and we heard that Ray Price was going to be in Denver the next day. So we went to Denver Ray Price was a great entertainer. And anyway,
yes,
he had just recorded for the Good Times. And they brought him and an 18-piece orchestra into the rodeo arena in a wagon.
Wow.
And the sun was going down over the Rocky Mountains to the west of us, and he stood in that wagon, and when he started singing For the Good Times, there wasn't a dry eye in the grandstands anywhere. That was the most beautiful sight and sound combined, to hear that song and see that sun going down.
Oh,
it was just beautiful.
Another one where you wish you could have recorded it. That's amazing.
Right.
That's amazing.
But it is recorded, but it's in my brain.
Yeah. Now, there was a period of time when you said you stopped music and you started working and you moved about, you did other things, and then you got back into music. What sort of things did you do during that interim?
Well, at the end of 1970, we retired from music. We'd been here on the road for several million miles and decided that, it was time to do something else. So we went to the Florida Keys, and we had lobster boats down there, and we
I didn't know there were lobsters in Florida. I thought they were all up in the New England states.
No, that's a Maine lobster, but the Florida lobster is the same lobster comes through all the Caribbean islands, and it comes through the Florida Keys every year, and there's a big season to catch into the Florida lobster.
Wow.
And then stone crabs. So those are the two items that we were fishing for.
I see.
And we did that for up in 1980, and then we went to Lake City, Florida, to start raising quarter horses. So that was supposed to be the retirement years. And next thing I knew, I was back in fishing in Marathon, and Gwen bought a nightclub in Fort White, Florida. So she stayed in the nightclub business, and I went back to fishing.
Wow, that's unbelievable. Now, you've written a lot of songs, and I know some you've recorded, and some the other big names have recorded that we recognize. Tell me about some of those songs.
Well, back in the 60s, I did a season with Carl and Pearl Butler right after they had a song called Don't Let Me Cross Over.
Mm-hmm.
So they asked me to write them a duet song, and so I wrote one called If You Were Her and He Was Me. It was one of those twisted country songs about two couples that was wishing that they was married to the other one or something.
Right.
To that end. I think it was referred to one time as a convoluted country song or something, but that was on one of their later albums.
Yeah.
And then about that time, we started recording ourselves, and then all the writing I was doing then was with going in on our records. And in those days, you always tried to write the backside of your records. So if your record sold, you got a ride out of it. So the next few years, while most of the writing I did was concentrated on our songs.
If you don't mind telling, what year were you born?
1937.
And I think you told me that makes you, as the younger folks might have said, 83 and a half years old now, correct?
Yes, right.
Now, this is amazing to me because you're kind of like Rock Kilo and Sonny Throckmorton. You're just a young man at heart, and you always will be. But the thing that's so amazing to me is everybody thinks that music is just for the youth, for the young folks. But you are currently writing again, and you're also recording because you have 2 recent releases and one that's upcoming. Why don't you tell us a little bit first about The Old Man and the Drunk?
Well, The Old Man and the Drunk story. I was sitting here one day. I was not trying to write a song, but all of a sudden this title came to me, and I picked up a pencil, and as fast as I could write, the next 10 minutes, this whole story came. I wrote it down, and I didn't change anything about it, and it became the story of The Old Man and the Drunk, about the fellow that he and his lady friend separated before their child was born, and he spent his life searching for that child.
That's a heartbreaking song. And country music, for the major part, I think, has been built around true life incidents and heartbreaking songs.
Yes, and because there's hardly anybody ever recognized the fact that there is men who search for their children, the same as it is with women.
Yeah.
But and this was just a different perspective on that, and he spent his whole life
and
looking for a child.
That video depicts that perfectly. And who played the part of the drunk?
Well, it's a gentleman named Otis Truax, and he's a great artist himself. And I saw one of his videos, and how do you ask a person if they'll come and play a drunk on the video, when you haven't met him before? And so I called him to get acquainted, and I told him I had a video in mind, and I wanted to know if he would be the character in the video.
Mm-hmm.
So he agreed to play the character role, which involved he played the old man in the story, and he played the drunk, both. And the punchline of the song is, when you get to be an old man, you don't want to be just an old drunk.
Yep.
And he played both the roles just superbly.
He certainly did.
And the fellow that did the video, he captured the story. In fact, there's another artist, Vernon Husky, that's one of our friends and has recorded some of our songs too. He played the bartender in that video.
I did not know that. I didn't know that was Vernon.
That was Vernon Husky that was the bartender.
I'll be darned.
That expelled the old man from the club when he was drunk.
Yeah.
Broke the mirror. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, that brings us to the other one that you did, and I know this is difficult for you to talk about, and I understand it. You were married to a lady for 27 years, is that right?
Right.
Named
Her
Scarlett.
name was,
Beautiful lady.
Scarlett Ferguson, and she was a very, very beautiful person and a beautiful lady, but she was also involved with radio stations here in Nashville, so she was in tune with the music industry when I met her.
and you two married, and you've recently released a song called Life After Death. And we generally think of that as in a spiritual manner, but you told the story so beautifully in music and in that video of how difficult it is to go on after you lose the person that makes you the person you are, the other part of you. Tell us about the song Life After Death.
Well, it was an easy song to write because it was a true story, but it was a very difficult song to perform and do that video.
I'm sure it was. And it was a wonderful video, and it touched me. You had film clips in there of your wedding and so many other things, and then, of course, your visit to the cemetery, and it was just so touching. The song alone was touching, but the video was just, it was definitely one that made reality to me. And I want everybody to go to your Facebook page, Jerry Collins, and look for the video on the song The Old Man and the Drunk and Life After Death, because those are awesome.
They're both on YouTube.
They're both on YouTube as
well.
well.
Go to YouTube under my name, Jerry Collins.
But they are wonderful, wonderful songs. And there are many songs that you have on YouTube as well, with Gwen and Jerry Collins. But you have another song that's going to be released before long. I want to hear a little bit about that as well.
Well, this new song, it's a true story about my life, more or less about being addicted to country music. Now, this song in no way condones the use of drugs, and I have never ever touched this product. But when the title came to me, if music was a drug, it would be like cocaine, because you get your highs and your lows and stuff in your life. And so, from what I have heard about it, that made perfect sense to me, that if music was a drug of choice, or if country music was a drug, it would be your cocaine.
Right.
And so I don't want anyone to be offended by that title, because it in no way encourages use of something so bad. But that's what, when the music gets a hold of you, it does the same thing to you as I can imagine that the drugs would do to a person that was addicted to that, because
Sure.
you get addicted to the music.
I'm sure you do, and you know, I felt a little of that myself. You know, you know me, and it's the one thing I think, besides faith in God, of course, that can lock out all of the world's problems for a time. When you make music, in fact, it's been proven by science that if a person listens to music, parts of their brain just light up. But if they sing or play music, it's like fireworks in the brain. It just overrides everything else, and certainly it could be very addictive. And this brings up another point. When you get to the point, and you haven't quit yet, and neither have I, but you reach a point to where you realize it's really much more difficult to participate actively in the music world, and it's very depressing sometimes not to be able to get out there and do the things you once did and enjoy it the way you once did. And that's a tough time, isn't it?
Well, it could be, except, you know, here's the saving grace part for you and I and people like us. We have an opportunity now with this internet and the new media type things, that we can produce and be part of music, and that goes around the world, where back in even our younger days, we didn't have these same opportunities we have now.
That's
so
a good perspective.
That is encouraging to people in our age group, because people don't care how old we are as long as the music we're putting out sounds good. And you just are a perfect example of that, because you just did I Wish I Was 18 Again, and of all the records that's on that song, if anyone listens to all the other versions and listens to Alicia's version, they're going to find your version is going to be the most pleasing one of that song that's ever been done.
Well, I appreciate that, Jerry.
And I was just so honored when you asked me to be part of it, because I mean, you did a fantastic job on that. And at no time in our lives in the past could we have done the things that we're doing right now.
You know, that's true, and I'm so glad you said that, because I had never looked at it from that perspective. I was really getting down and thinking my days are over, and you were one of the very few people who really, well, I won't say very few people, but you were the biggest one to encourage me to continue to follow that dream, because so many times I've wanted to give up. But I will say, with that record that I just put out, had it not been for your voiceover on that last chorus and at the end, that song would not be what it is. You made that song what it is. And the video, you know, Sonny Throckmorton told me when he gave me that song, he liked what I did with the video because it portrayed the point he was trying to get across. But you enhanced that to the max. You were just the saving grace on that song, and I appreciate you so much.
You're very kind there, but believe me, the honor was all mine to get to be on it because it's your song, and you did a superb job on it, and I don't
Thank you
think
so much.
nobody will ever touch that job again.
I appreciate that. Jerry, we're kind of winding down here. Is there anything else that you'd like the people out there to know about country music and about your feelings?
Yeah, you know, people talk about, well, I got a song that's not been released yet. I think Clayton Q's going to do it. It's called New Shoes.
Uh-huh.
And this addresses the fact that, you know, country music does change. And if it hadn't have changed, we'd still be playing fiddles because the Grand Ole Opry started with Uncle Jimmy Thompson being a fiddle player.
Right.
But the singers that come along years later, like Roy Acuff and George Jones and people like that, and Hank Williams, and started telling stories with songs, they're the ones that opened the doors for people like you and I now, this many years later, to still be able to produce a storytelling song.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the people like George Jones and the Merle Haggards and stuff, you know, there's a question that George asked. In fact, this is in that song. It says, old Possum asked a question back some years ago, that who's going to fill their shoes and play them Opry shows?
Yeah.
Well, the answer to that question is nobody is going to fill their shoes, but these new artists are making room for their new shoes because you know, we've always got to have new people come along to keep this music alive.
That's right.
And so this song of mine, I think Clayton Q is getting. It's going to be his next release probably, and he's one of the great young artists right now. And in case no one has heard of Clayton Q yet, you need
he
to
is
check
awesome.
him out.
He is awesome.
And so when I met him, I finished the song with him in mind. And when he heard it, he said, "I'm doing the song."
Well,
So
I'll tell you, he's got the corner on the market because he's very talented. He seems to be such a kind, sweet, gentle-hearted person, and he's not very hard on the eyes either. I'm telling you.
No, he's about 6'6", and you know something, he doesn't drink or smoke, and he's the type of music he does. You'd think, wow, you know, he's pretty wild and crazy, but he does it all so well.
Well, he is such a fine young man and so polite and nice.
And right now he's out west doing safe distancing tours. He has not stopped during this time, but he's went out by himself, filmed his own shows and stuff, and he's staying in touch with people. And I think he's in California this week.
Yes,
so
he is just awesome. Well, Jerry, I think we've just about wrapped this up. We're approaching the half-hour mark, but I want to thank you so much for doing this for me and for Tim Childry with the show Columbus. And I'm hoping when we air this audio along with the photographs of you and me and Tim, that we can fit in, if you don't mind, give us permission to play The Old Man and the Drunk and Life After Death.
You have my permission to do whatever you want to with any of the stuff there. And any of the stuff that Gwen and I did years ago that's on YouTube, feel free to use whatever you need.
Thank you so much. And I urge all of our listeners to go to YouTube and look for Jerry Collins, Collins, and all of the myriad of music that he has there on YouTube, his own music and his and Gwen's music. There's some wonderful stuff out there. Get in touch with classic country and the new classic country sound, if you will. We appreciate all of you listening in. And Jerry, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you in mid-July and getting involved in the country music networking.
Thank you very much.
Is that something we can discuss yet?
Well, let's hold off a little bit, but it's everybody remember the three letters CMN, and there will be news to come.
And I am so honored to be not a founding part, but a charter part of that. I am very honored. Jerry Collins, out of Nashville area and other such places, thank you so much for this wonderful talk, and we will see you out there very soon.
Thank you, ma'am. It was my honor. Bye-bye.
Bye now, Jerry.